Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, a podcast about leaving self-doubt in the dust, punching fear in the face, and taking bold action toward your biggest dreams. I'm Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. Today, I am super excited to introduce you to my new friend, Tracy Friedlander, who is a fellow musician. So, hey, Tracy, welcome to the podcast, and tell us a little bit more about you.
Hey, thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm a musician and a business owner and a newbie copywriter. I hesitate to call myself a copywriter in the presence of like real copywriters, but yeah, I'm definitely like, I've had my feet sort of, and we're going to talk about this. I'm so excited, in two worlds, like I'm coming from this world of you go to school and you get degrees and the more, the better. Mm-hmm. And then you emerge and then someone chooses you and anoints you as, you can have this thing, you can have this position. If you can win the audition and you can prove yourself mm-hmm. on the right time and the right day in front of the right people that are in the right mood and all of that. and then you can be adored and appreciated and paid what you deserve. And so I did that path in the orchestra world for a majority of my career up until, about 5 years ago. I came pretty close to winning an audition at one time, and I was offered kind of you can have a job here still. It's just not an official job with a title, and you can get paid a little bit less, but you're going to work with us full time and you won't get benefits, but it's better than what you have, freelancing in Chicago. So that's a good offer, right? And, I was around 30 years old and I was like, yeah, I'm tired of waiting by the phone to see what my next gig is going to be and working in bars and restaurants and all the things. So I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina at that point. And then I worked in that orchestra for 10 years, like full-time orchestra musician every single weekend playing concerts. I play the French horn.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I got an insight of really what that industry is all about, without having my official title and all the things that make me more respected by the other musicians. So it's mm-hmm. like kind of a mind mess up kind of situation, when you think, oh, I need that thing. And I just almost have it, but I don't really have it. Mm-hmm. So then I did this other thing, which is like, I started my real life, I met my now husband. We bought a house, we had a kid, we did all those things. And then that's when you're like, as a musician going, oh, wait, you're allowed to do other stuff besides just, keep your eye on the ball and take every audition and move to whatever state, mm-hmm. we'll hand you a job and all of that. So, but then around 2016 was when I really decided like this way isn't the best, because I'm not super happy where I'm at, but I don't want to go back on the audition path and try to join that rat race again. So I started building my business, but it sure wasn't a business back then.
Well, and I thought that was really cool because I was really excited to talk because I talk to a lot of copywriters. And for anybody that's not familiar, copywriting is basically sales writing. We write a lot of ads. And I'm moving out of copywriting. So you don't have to compare yourself to me. There's plenty of room for everybody that wants to explore copywriting. But I thought it was really cool to speak to someone in a related niche. I see classical music as related to copywriting in that it's creative and there's a lot of the same things that you experienced where it's like somebody wants this dream gig over here. Okay, but will you settle for this thing that's not quite what you wanted, but you're still kind of getting paid to be creative? So like it's a compromise, but it feels like a compromise that's acceptable.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of that.
The other thing.
I know, like it's better than the alternative of like, God, waiting tables for the rest of your life. I've definitely made those compromises before too. So I thought that was interesting that there's so much similarity in creative fields and like what you're supposed to do, quote unquote, in order to get the gig.
Right.
And, if you follow the series of steps, like you were saying, you get the degrees and you get the audition and you follow the steps and you're going to be this respected person. Like Oh, it's so interesting to me that there's always a series of steps you're supposed to follow, and they never seem to work out for anybody except that one person that got the steps in the right order at the right time.
I know.
So I thought it was pretty cool that like, you followed it up to a point, you got to a certain level, you were okay with it until it wasn't working for you. And then you had to figure out something else. So can you tell me a little bit more about this business transition?
Yeah, I'd love to. So this was really, when the stars kind of align and something happens, you're like, if that didn't happen, then all of this stuff wouldn't have happened at all.
That's my whole career.
So I got back in touch with an old friend from high school, and she and her twin brother were in my youth orchestra with me in Chicago Youth Symphony. So this is like ancient history. We were friends when we were 15 years old. And then we lost touch over college because this was before people even really recognized that email was a thing you could use, And so we either wrote letters to each other. I'm like aging myself right here, or we didn't communicate. And so we lost touch. Then we both moved back to Chicago. And we were friends while we were there. And then we both went our separate ways again. And we just lost touch for probably about 10 years. And for some reason, I think we must have connected on Facebook or something like that. And then so we were Facebook friends, but still weren't really totally in touch. And then she reached out to tell me some stuff about her family that was happening. And she was like, you were one of my high school friends. And I just want you to know this. And so we started chatting, and we were hitting it off just like we were old friends because we were old friends from before. And so we started talking, and I found out that I knew that she had quit music from the Chicago days. But since that time, because she had gone into like the corporate world, and then she ended up leaving the corporate world and becoming self-employed. And I found out that she had started some businesses with her brother, and she was doing copywriting, her brother was, and they were doing a lot of internet stuff, like before the internet marketing thing, like when it was new.
Yeah.
And so we started talking about that, and she really opened up my eyes to a whole bunch of stuff I never even knew existed, because I wasn't living that life. Like, I thought Facebook was just a dumb place for people to share pictures of their kids and photos of their cats. Food or cats or whatever. Right. And I didn't even know there were marketers. I didn't even know what marketing was. Like, this is how noob I was back in 2016. And she's telling me all this stuff. And she's like, she was coaching at the time. She was a business coach. And she said to me, well, maybe we should work together, and I'll give you a great deal. And like, what do you think of this? And it was like stupid cheap what she offered me, especially what I know now. Right. And then we started the next day after we decided to work together. She said, follow these 5 people. One of them was Gary Vaynerchuk. One of them was, Grant Cardone, like people who would build up big audiences around the thing that they wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. And I started going down that rabbit hole, and like, oh, wow, this is like, how do like 5 million people know about this person? Like, I've never even heard of them, And she basically said, like, what would you grow an audience around? And we started to talk, and essentially she just like nurtured a business owner out of me. Like, I want to talk about this career path. I want to talk about this crazy, like, stuff that's gone on in my life, maybe the point where I'm at. And then I started researching, like, what would I talk about? And the more I dug deep in that, I said to her, hey, maybe I should start a podcast someday about like the people who have created careers outside the traditional path. And she said, okay, when does your podcast launch?
I love and hate that question.
I know. Cause in my mind, I was like, well, I'll research podcasts and I'll figure out how to do that. And then maybe someday that would be a thing I do. And she was like, when does it launch? And I like, that was kind of like a shit my pants moment, Mm-hmm. I'm like, and so
our mutual friend, Chris Orzakowski, did that to me, just so you know.
Oh, really?
Yes. He was in the background pulling the strings like, Angie, when is the podcast launching? So I know that feeling very, very deeply.
That's awesome. Because really, there's no way of learning how to do a podcast before you just do it. Like mm-hmm. You could, if you Google how to start a podcast, you'll have like 50,000 pages with different ways on every page on how to do this. Yep.
It's the same with life. It's the same with business. Like you just got to stop researching and start doing it at some point. So please continue with the story.
Exactly. So she said to me, like, what you need to do is reach out to 5 people you would like to interview. They can be your friends or not, but, and tell them, I would love for you to be a guest on my new podcast, which launches on X date. And I was like, okay, that was super scary for me, because to reach out to people and say, I have a podcast that I really actually didn't have, right. Was so scary. But it was great because the first person who I reached out to wrote back right away and said, yeah, this date works. And that was like official. Between now and that date, I need to figure this out.
Yeah. There's a special kind of magic in holding your feet to the fire that way, especially like when you share it with someone outside yourself, because it's really easy to break promises to ourselves, right? Because if you don't say it out loud, was it really a promise? Is it really lying to myself? No. But once you say it out loud to someone else and they're like, so about that podcast, I told somebody else I was coming on your podcast and they're interested in being a guest. I'm going to fire off it. Like, it's amazing how quickly that happens. Because I would say the same thing happened when I started my podcast. First, I didn't think I could get 5 people. And then I didn't think I could get 10 people. And then somewhere around the 10th episode, it just took off. And suddenly people are reaching. I heard you have a podcast. I'd love to come on. Here's ideas of what I could talk about. And it's just.
That's great.
We're recording this in April. As of today, I have just slotted my my episode for November 3rd. So like that's how much I have scheduled to be produced or recorded or in various stages of productions. And none of that would have happened if Chris hadn't been in the background badgering me to pick a date and just start putting it out there. But that's so great. So
awesome. Yeah. And it feels so good to have things in the can. It's like this kind of process is like, okay, that's done. It's getting shipped. There's actually something to be said for entrepreneurship. And I mentioned that whole like boundaries around work thing as an entrepreneur. I think there's something to be said for being able to say, I finished this thing. It's completed. It's shipped. Because really there's never an end in sight. And I think that's what I struggled with at first. Because you can just work forever.
Yeah. That was a good thing that I learned. Thankfully, I learned this in my corporate days, but I used to make myself insane because I just had this thought in my head that was stuck there. Like a stupid story we tell ourselves sometimes that if I could just get ahead, I would be happy. Newsflash, you're never really ahead. There's just like, this is enough work for today. That's the point that you get to. And it's actually good news because if you're ever ahead or if you're ever finished with the work, then people wouldn't be paying you to do more work. Like the fact that it doesn't end is a good thing for you because you keep getting paid to do the thing. It's nice. Look at it from another angle.
Exactly. And as a musician, of course, your work is never done on your instrument. You always have to practice, but you're forced to stop when your chops don't work anymore. Your face, like your muscles in your face can't make any more notes. Or, if you keep going, you might hurt your lip. Like that was the story for a horn player. Or like the rehearsal
or for
is
a vocalist, like I've literally lost my voice singing before too. It's like there's a certain physical point too. And I think that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, even in a digital space like this. I mean, there's a point where you physically should stop working. Like, let's not talk about how far you could go. Let's talk about how far you should go. And that limit is probably a few steps back from what you think.
Right. I mean, when I first started writing, one of the things I didn't honor soon enough, but I kept trying, was to write at night when I was tired. And then I'd be like, oh my God, I have no ideas. This sucks. Like, of course not. I can't. So now I just have a rule. I don't write at night.
See, that's such a good takeaway from this too. And another thing that I want to point out to people that are listening is that you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't tried that and failed and then recognized, okay, so I'm trying to do this. Something about this isn't working. Okay. The new rule is I don't write at night.
Right. I wish it was that fast though, how you just described it. Cause I probably tortured myself over at night so many times, like, oh my God, I suck. Numerous times.
We're glossing over all of the failures and just pointing out the takeaways here, but like, just trust us guys. Like we're saving you years. If you just follow this, even if it doesn't make sense right now, just try it. If it's not working for you, maybe it's just because you haven't found the way that does work for you. Doesn't mean that you suck.
Exactly.
jumping into this podcast and creating it, like how fast they can take off. You mentioned before we started recording that you had to figure out how to monetize it kind of on the fly, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, at first everyone's like, why do you have a podcast? How do you make money doing a podcast? And this was, almost 5 years ago. So I'm not saying that they were new 5 years ago, certainly, but there's more of a conversation around podcasts now than there was then. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people were just like, I don't get it. Why are you doing that? You know? And my answer was, I don't really know how to make money on a podcast, but I'm just doing this thing. And what I know now is that, most regular people aren't going to get like thousands of dollars for their podcast episodes, right? Mm-hmm. Like I wasn't expecting to turn into Tim Ferriss and interviewing classical musicians and stuff like that. But, I kept putting out content. The more years went by. I mean, there was a couple of failed attempts at monetizing earlier with the original coach who kind of pointed me in this direction. For a little while, we worked together and we created some fireside chats series podcasts on the same podcast, but just on this weekly Sunday episode. And we worked together and created some offerings, but it wasn't super aligned. And then she was like, you know what, I don't really want to do this. I want to focus on my own thing. So then when that happened, I was like, oh, wow. Like now I'm by myself and I don't know what I would do if I was going to monetize. So I'm just going to focus on building the audience. Mm-hmm. So I kept posting, I kept creating content. And for a long time, I sort of had one foot in one world and one in the other. Like I was still freelancing a little bit, but I will say that like, as a musician, doing gigs. And what I will say is that having my own thing really helped me to function better in the other world, because I wasn't my everything. It wasn't the only thing I did. Mm-hmm. So that was good. But yeah, it came to a point where I was like, this is too much work for it to be just this thing I'm doing to build an audience. I need to monetize it or I need to quit. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I ended up joining another coaching program, and it was a situation where somebody reached out to me. Like, I think there's people who feel like, oh, that's sleazy if you like message someone and say, hey, I really admire the work you're doing. Like where are you, like if it's a coach and they're talking about like reaching out. In this situation, she did that. And I was like, my first instinct was like, oh, she probably has a program she's trying to fill, right? Mm-hmm. But then I started talking to her and I was like, oh my God, I really need this right now.
Yeah.
It's
so funny how we get sucked into that idea of like sales is sleazy because just based on bad past experiences. And I can't start a business and sell. But I think if you come from a place like she did with authenticity in mind, it wasn't just like you said, trying to reach out and I see what Tracy's doing. Tracy will probably take this spot in my program. Let me go see. Like a bad MLM penny, somebody that you haven't spoken to for 10 years. So like, hey, girlfriend, how you doing? By the way, I started with, I don't even know what the MLMs are these days. I started selling weight loss shakes. Do you want to be in my downline? No, I do not want to be in your downline. But I will say, you seem super excited. Best of luck with that. You go hustle. I'll wish you luck. Don't ever contact me.
Yeah, but you know what's really funny how she did it? She was like, hey, well, let's talk. And so I was like, okay. And so we talked and I was like, oh, she's totally going to sell me her thing. And then she didn't. She didn't mention it. And then she was like, well, how about, check out this book or check out these MP3s I want you to hear, because this is pertaining to our conversation and let's have another conversation. Mm-hmm. So then we had another one and it was a really great call and she didn't mention program again. And then we did it again, like 3 or 4 times she gave me calls and I was starting to get more clarity around like, oh, maybe this really is possible. Maybe I can offer something. Maybe I could create a program. And she still did it. And finally I had to be like, what's in this for you? Why do you keep giving me calls? Why are you doing this? And she's like, well, I'm glad that you asked because I actually do have a program coming up and I'd like to tell you about it. It was really funny because I was just like, what? You got to tell me what's happening here. I'm so confused. Mm-hmm. But
see how naturally the sale flows when you just focus on helping people. That's if you get one takeaway from all this, like sell that way. from a genuine place of trying to help people, and you will be surprised how fast the sales come. But anyway,
because it wasn't easy. Once that happened, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this thing.
Mhm.
And then once I got inside of it, it was like, I had this realization one day because I was not a marketer in that point. I was a student. I was her client.
Mhm.
I was, taking it in. And I remember one moment I was like, wait a second, this is a cool model. It was a group program that was taught live. Everything was live. And I was like, oh, well, I don't need to know how to create video courses or do any of that. Like if I do this thing, I could model it completely after the program I'm in right now.
Mhm.
And so that's what I did. And so that it was by joining a program and actually investing in myself, not only learning from her, but also experiencing a certain model and then going, oh, this isn't such a hard one to model. I'll just do that.
Mhm. I love that because you didn't reinvent the wheel and you didn't approach it from I need to create something new that nobody else has ever seen before. Just like, oh, this works. I think I could borrow and adapt this for my people. That should work just fine.
Yeah.
Save yourself years of pain, guys. Listen to Tracy. Tracy is very smart in how she approached all of this. I'm just saying.
Thank you. I wish I felt so smart back then, but like, yeah, it definitely was a realization like, oh, I could do this. And originally she was sort of like pointing me in the direction of, you can get one-on-one clients. And that's probably your quickest way to money. Because you don't have to have a launch and an enrollment and all of that. But I was really drawn to doing the group thing. So I went against her advice and I did the group thing.
Mhm.
And it was great because for my first group program, I got 4 people in.
Nice.
And one of them, I helped her create a similar program for her niche. And she immediately made like $9,000.
Wow.
And so that was my first testimonial. So that was really cool because she was at the point in her journey that she could do that, which was good, because, you can't take like any old person and then they make $9,000 the next day. Like it wasn't that quick, but it was like, she was like such a good person for me to work with right away because she had already sort of laid the groundwork audience building wise and stuff that she was able to do that.
No, and I think that's great because one of these, like mental mindset traps that aspiring entrepreneurs fall into, I think, is this, I'm not expert enough or I don't know enough. And so I love the fact that you're like, okay, so I just learned this model and I'm implementing it in my own business and I see an opportunity to teach someone else. So like you're brand new to this and you've just learned this thing and you shared it with someone else who then put it to use and made $9,000. I think that's fantastic. Like, just be willing to share what you know, even if you just learned it, even if you don't have a degree in it. Oh my God, heaven forbid that you just share something you just learned and somebody can use it exactly like you taught it. Hey, now you're an expert in that thing. Congratulations. You got someone results and you can turn around and keep doing that. Oh, that's so amazing. I'm so glad you told me that. So glad
I know.
you told
And
me
isn't that so the antithesis of how we're taught in school? Mm-hmm. Like you must do this studying for 4 years, but by the time you're done with 4 years, you won't feel ready. So you should probably do 2 more years and maybe 2 after that even.
Yeah, this idea that you've got to pay your dues and earn the right to have someone call you an expert. You know what? I have a master's degree too. I bought into that education as a form of advancement, like pretty hardcore. And I think that's why I'm so passionately against it these days. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're listening to me, if you are a surgeon, please go to school. Practice on dead people before you practice on me. I would like that. Lawyers, please learn the law. There are certain professions that I absolutely do think that you need a certain amount of higher training and, bar association and doctor's exams. Yes, please. Writers, musicians, creative types, you go through the school of hard knocks. You go through the school of creation, my friends. And that's how you get really good, not by paying your dues and going to school and paying someone else to train you, but just by creating, because creators create. I've had so many people push back on me. They're like, how do I become a writer? I'm like, how much writing do you do? And they're like, well, I'm not a writer yet. And I'm like, writers write. Just saying, like, even if you don't get paid to write, do you have a journal? Do you write emails to people? Like, you need to be writing if you want to consider yourself a writer. And about
that's how
half
I learned
of them,
how to write. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I was coaching with my friend. Mm-hmm. This was way back in the day when she first introduced this whole idea to me. And then she's like, you need to start posting. And so, but she said, I want to edit all your posts.
Okay.
And I mean, maybe it didn't start out. I can't remember exactly if it started out like, I want to edit all your posts, or start posting and then, hey, why don't you send those to me first? And I'll make them a little punchier or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Because I wasn't a social media copywriter type writer at all. I was taking my skills from English class and papers from school. So I was too long-winded. I probably, like, if you put it in the Hemingway app, it would be like 12th grade or whatever, you know, and you're like,
super
no.
formal. Yeah.
Yeah. Formal. Exactly. And so she would edit, and she wouldn't really do much to them, but she would add stronger language. She would make the sentences shorter. So instead of teaching me like, this is how you do it, she would just edit. And then I would look at the edits and go, okay, I see what she did here. And then we went back and forth like that for a few months until she was like, I don't need to edit your posts anymore.
Nice.
And then once she kind of released me into the wild, then I really developed my own voice by doing a lot more writing. Yeah.
Is it like, talk about developing your skill by doing the thing and just creating. And then like, it sounds like super woo, and I'm not a very woo person at all, but like when you're ready, the teacher will appear. And so like you're putting yourself out there, even if you don't feel like the best writer on the face of the planet, even if you don't feel like you've necessarily quote unquote earned the title of writer, you're putting out your content and someone says, hey, I want to help you get even better at this.
Yeah.
And then they work with you for a little bit and you learn what you need to learn. You take what you can from this situation, you get better, you apply it. I love this because like people are going to pop in and they're going to criticize your work all the time because it's easier to be a critic than a creator. I'm just going to say that. You don't have to take everybody's advice. Just take what works for you, what sits with you, because you even did that back with your first coach that was saying one-to-one is going to be your fast path to money. That's what you need to do. And you're like, no, group coaching is for me. There's a certain magic to following your gut like that and learning what you can learn. Just make the choice, follow your gut, and then learn from it and keep moving forward. I love it. So that's cool. That's how you turned this podcast that started as a labor of love and like, I need a creative outlet. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to help musicians because that's my goal. And then you started to create a program out of it and have grown that. So I think that's pretty cool. How did the program grow beyond? I'm assuming it grew beyond that initial 4, but like, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So that was my first program at the end of 2019. And we all know what happened in March of 2020 before I even was about to create another program. And I thought, because that was a 4-month program. So when that was over, I was like, I'm going to launch my next one. And I want it to be 6 months and it's going to be more expensive and all those things. And then March 2020 happened. And I was like, wow, there's a ton of musicians who need to get online fast, whether that's teaching, whether that's whatever, like they need an outlet here. And so I kind of threw together, it was essentially the same content, but I made it a shorter, less expensive option and filled it. Like if I compare that to any other launch I've ever done, it was the easiest launch I've ever done, probably because of the price point and the moment in time, you know? Because I did a free training to kind of promote it. Well, actually, it's funny. I didn't even plan on creating the program. I did a free training just because I was like, hey, I need to talk about audience building, people. Like, you guys got to do that right now. If you want to make money during this time that doesn't look like very good for everybody, you know, that all the symphony orchestras were canceling their seasons up through like by April, they were canceling through December and stuff. During the free training, like, you know how Facebook Lives are, like, even if you announce them in advance, maybe you'll get a handful of people, but I had like 50 people on the live at the same time. I mean, everyone was at home. And so suddenly I had all these people on the live, and then I just decided, you know, I am going to create a program for these people. So that's what I did. And I've been essentially doing that model ever since. And I've launched it now. This is the 4th version of that I'm in right now with my group. So, and I essentially teach them all the ways that I've, you know, gotten to the point where I am now, mostly social media and basic copywriting for social media, you know?
I think that's awesome. Like audience growth as a musician so that you can break out of that traditional path that's been prescribed to us all, right? Like and create your own musical destiny. I do love that. This last round I focused on teachers because that's really
the path to monetizing. If you play an instrument and you're a teacher, you're probably going to make more money teaching lessons than if you want to start a Patreon account or something. That's going to take a lot longer, know? So that's kind of been the focus at this point, but.
And I think that's good because like what I'm seeing here in your journey is just a curiosity first and foremost versus judging these ideas. Like, I wonder if that could work for me. I'm going to try it and see what happens. So I think that is a big, big asset in any person exploring entrepreneurship, is just this openness to trying something and seeing what happens versus prejudging it. And then using the data that you get, right? The results of that and pivoting. Because I love that you brought up 2020 is a big pivot point for all of us. And pivot kind of got overused last year, but that's basically what it was. The plans that you had got thrown out the window. And if you were somebody that had to cling to that plan because it's the plan, damn it, and I invested all this time in it and I need to follow it, well, then the world moved on without you because you were unwilling to look at another way of doing things. And so I love the fact that you were like, I got to help people right now. Again, going back to that sales process with your first coach, she taught you this program, but she just wanted to help you first. That led to an offer that led to you growing your business and helping people and then creating this program that you could just run it again and again. Oh, so much goodness here. Like trying hard not to geek out and make this like a 5-hour call where I just dig into your business and share everything about it. So I know one of the other things that we were talking about was, okay, so you've explored this space, you feel good about the work that you've done, and now you want to grow and expand. So here's another pivot on the horizon. Let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. So, and we were talking about boundaries around work. I've been feeling this in my gut that I want to serve a bigger audience. I would love to serve just beginner entrepreneurs, which is who I've been serving already, except for they happen to be musicians. Yeah. So I haven't branched out into the audience building side of that yet, but I've been feeling it kind of for a long time. And then last week, for about 7 days, we took a break. Ooh. And we went to the beach. I'm in Mexico, by the way.
Fantastic.
One of the things that I've been able to do because of my pivot was that I could live in another country because I'm working online completely, and that has been one of the things that I'm like, thank God I started doing that back in 2016 because I get to be here now. So we went to the beach and like, here's me going, okay, I can promise us 4 days and then we're coming back because back to work, And then we had a friend who was like, well, I have, my family has a beachfront spot in Puerto Vallarta. You want to just come and stay for a couple more days? And initially I'm like, work, need, back.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, you know what? We're already out here. It took us 4 hours to drive here. Let's just go there. And we got there and I was like, I'm so glad I'm here. Like, it's a view of the dang Pacific Ocean, like from this 9th floor apartment, So we did that. And it was sort of like that process of unplugging that I really realized, you know what? I need to do this pivot. Like, I'm really, really feeling it in my gut. And it's scary. It's really scary because I'm like, well, these are the people I've always known. I love other people that aren't musicians and they're not necessarily scary people, but like, how do I break into that? How do I, start building around that? Because up until now, I've just like, if I look at all my Instagram followers, they're all musicians because that's what I've been talking about for the last 4 years,
Well, and that's the same thing. Like, I've been talking about copywriting and marketing forever. And now that I'm kind of expanding into this, let's say creative entrepreneur space, because that's really who lights me up. People that want to write or draw or bake or take photos or be musicians full time. Like, that's really, you can create a business out of that and kind of start as a freelancer and then work your way into something more solid as you learn the business owner skills to complement your craft. And so I think that that's pretty cool. And again, like just calling attention to your curiosity, your openness, and then listening to your gut and your intuition. Like, this is a direction I need to follow. I'm still going to serve these people over here that I know and love. And I'm going to also invite these new people in and see what I can do to help them. I think that's such a great way to approach it. And the reason I wanted to call attention to that is, okay, guys, if you're new to entrepreneurship, this is really important. This is also a writer downer. So Tracy is breaking into my space. And I could choose to try and build a wall around this and be like, no, creative entrepreneurs are mine. But notice that I'm interviewing Tracy, because I think what Tracy is doing is fantastic. And there are more of you out there than I could ever possibly hope to help. And to try would probably be working myself to death. And I don't want to do that. So Tracy's got an amazing approach and an amazing personality, and she's going to help some people in an amazing way. And I think I've also got an amazing approach and a freaking kick-ass personality, and I'm going to help some people in an awesome way. You might work with one of us or both of us, but look at this. We're colleagues, not competitors. Yeah. We can collaborate instead of compete. And I just want to point that out to you, because I hear so many people object. I can't start my business. I can't do a freelancer because look at all the other people that are doing this. Bullshit, says me. You can absolutely do the thing. Do you want to do the thing, or do you want to keep making excuses? All right, I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, because in the music world, it's super competitive, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to an audition and there's 90 other horn players, you're in direct competition with each one of those people to get that one position they're offering. But in reality, you're really mostly in competition with yourself, because you have to do that performance the best. But seriously, if it does come down to between you and one other person, that's your direct competition too, because there's one spot and there's two people.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't that.
Yeah.
But that mindset that you've been sort of conditioned through, even through like chair competitions in band, where they're like, ooh, do you want to try to get first chair? You have to beat out your competitors. And like competition is really kind of ingrained in us from a really early age. And then you get to a business owner level, an adult, and how do you extract that from your brain so you can, be happy? Because that feeling is not good. You don't feel good when you feel like that, right?
It's not. And it doesn't make you feel good at all. What I like to call it is an alternate reality, right? We're going to go woo again, even though I swear I'm not woo. Reality is what you see, is just a combination of perceptions and images that you can see. And to a certain extent, since we're all humans and we can only process so much, right? We see the world through a filter, which means that you're not seeing all of the reality there is. You're only seeing your reality. So if your reality is, I have to work in a cube from 9 to 5, I have to beat that guy and get a promotion. Do you really see Tracy's reality of working in a condo from Puerto Vallarta with a view of the beach? Do you really see Angie's reality of recording a podcast from a random Airbnb in Nashville? Because that's what I want to be doing right now. You don't even see that as real, as something that you can do, because you're so stuck in this vision. Like that happened to me once when I was still a corporate copywriter, and I was 10 to 12 hour days with like hours and hours of meeting in between all the work that still had to get done, hour to 2 hours of commute every day, total toxic work environment with people like storming into my cube to scream at me if they didn't agree with my stuff. It was horrible.
Wow.
And when one of my friends was like, yeah, I think I want to travel to Spain for a month, so I'm going to tell my job, this is what I really want to do. I hope that we can work together, but if not, bye. It's been great. Thanks for the fish. I literally looked at her and I was like, you can do that? You can just tell somebody that this is what I want to do, take it or leave it. And she was like, yeah. And that was just kind of it took the blinders off me. And she's over here living this whole other life that I didn't even think was possible. Oh my God. And that's why I love what you and I are doing now, meeting new people and collaborating and showing other people that your reality isn't real, guys. You don't have to do it any way other than the way that you want to. And yeah, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fuck it up. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I've screwed up and failed. I'm sure Tracy has screwed up and failed. Yeah. Welcome to being an entrepreneur. This is about falling down and skinning your knees and getting back up and going, oh, well, that hurt. How do I prevent that from happening again?
Exactly. And, I love that you brought that up. I mean, it's so funny how we keep kind of bringing up woo-woo stuff, and we're neither one of us are really that woo, although I do really like tarot cards, but I don't know very much about them. I follow this person who repeatedly on his videos, he'll say, he's not woo either, but he'll say like, this is a 3D virtual real life video game life. Like you can actually do whatever you want.
You're operating the controls all the time, as it turns out.
Yeah, as it turns out.
Mm-hmm. So, God, I love that too. Because for a long time, I really wanted to travel. And, I was either stuck in a day job that didn't give me much flexibility, wouldn't allow me, quote unquote. I wouldn't allow myself basically to go travel.
Yeah.
Or I was with partners that wouldn't go with me. And I imposed this rule that I couldn't go on my own. Like, it's not safe. I'm a woman, but I wouldn't even know what to do. You know what I do, guys? Here's the spoiler. Whatever the fuck I want. If I wake up today and I decide that I want to do work writing on my towel or take my laptop to a coffee shop, which is kind of cliche, but you know what? Last week I took a work meeting. I took a client call at the Gaylord Oprylands here in Nashville, which is a gigantic hotel with literally like 9 acres of gardens and waterfalls and a freaking indoor boat ride. And that's where I took my meeting because that's what I wanted to do. And instead of the client being like, why the hell are you doing? Why aren't you at home on your computer? They never even asked that. They actually looked at my background and they were like, where are you? That looks really cool. And then it started a discussion because I followed my instinct. Like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go do this thing and then I'm going to make it work and figure out how to make it work. The answer is a Bluetooth headset with good noise canceling. That's the answer right there.
That's amazing. And I love everything you just said. And to be honest, like I do the thing. And then sometimes I'm like, should I feel guilty about this? Like I'm at the beach dealing with my group program. And I'm like, are they going to think I'm a slacker because I'm not at home? And then I'm like, no, they didn't. They thought it was cool. And they noticed the orange wall was different from last week. And that's it.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like I came to another country to live when you're not supposed to do that. And I did it anyway with my whole family, and like, yes, you can do whatever you want. And if you're moving in this direction, like I used to think, like what you just said, I used to think, oh my gosh, I can only move to a city that has the job audition that I win. So like I would open the paper every month. There's a union paper and in the back, there's the audition ads. And so like, if I want to do any of these, I could move to Phoenix or Dallas or, and then you look at the price, how much do they pay? And like that wouldn't make sense for me to move there for that, And when I was in my 20s, I did that. And I was like, a job for the Virginia Symphony, let's do it. And I didn't even find out how much it paid. And I went and auditioned and I was like, whatever. I'm just going to audition. It probably doesn't pay much. I don't know. And then I won the audition and then I had to move and it paid like $20,000 before taxes. And by the way, moving isn't cheap.
Well, but talk about learning by doing, like following your gut and then going, okay, well, note to self. Next time, get the price before you commit to moving. But hey, let's go have an adventure.
Yeah. And do the math on what taxes are and how much money you actually get paid.
Oh, God. Yeah, no kidding. So welcome to creative entrepreneurship, guys. It's going to be quite an adventure. But remember, your reality is what you make of it. You can choose to do whatever the hell you want. And, I'm sure that there are going to be client calls eventually where somebody's like, why the hell are you at the Gaylord Nashville? And I'm going to be like, why the hell are you even working with me? Do you know me? You get to choose and you get to see what happens next. And you get to use the data that comes from that decision to make even better decisions next time. And you can create a completely different reality from the one that you are sitting in today. I promise you that. I promise you that. So Tracy, oh my gosh, this has been a fantastic call. Like, I'm so excited and I'm sad that it's coming to a close, but I want to give you time to tell us more about where to find you.
Yes. Well, I would love for anyone to check out Crushing Classical podcast. I mean, even if you're not a musician, there's some really good interviews on there with people who are doing really cool things. And there's a guy who plays concerts on a 9-foot Steinway in the middle of a ranch in Oregon. And there's there's all kinds of interesting business, like creative businesses that people have created. So that's super cool. And my website is crushingclassical.com.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Do not be surprised if I write back to you and bug you to come on for a follow-up, because that was such a great combo.
That'll be fun. And you're going to be on my podcast soon.
Yes, so. I am. And I'm going to share that with everybody. I'm going to scream it from the rooftops, I promise. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure, and I will talk to you soon. So that is it. Another awesome episode of Permission to Kick Ass on the books. If you want to know more about the show, if you want to know more about me, Angie Coley, and the mission I'm on to help entrepreneurs punch fear in the face and do big, bold things, then head on over to permissiontokickass.com. That is all one word together, permissiontokickass.com. Make sure to sign up for my email list so that you know whenever there's a hot, fresh, and ready podcast episode out for you. And also on Mondays, I like to send out a little newsletter called Kick Monday's Ass. I'm sure you're totally surprised by that. So thank you for being here with me today. I'm Angie Coley. Make sure that you share this with a friend that needs to hear this message today. Like it, share it, comment wherever you're listening to this today, and let's go kick some ass.